We're ready for the start. They're off.
And welcome in, everybody, to It's Official, the weekly banner and replay show where we look back at 5 hot topics in the racing industry. Alongside Jeff Siegel from Santa Anita and First Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk with First Bet and Express Bet. Jeff, we've got a big week coming up this week. Of course, on Saturday, it's Big Cap Day in your backyard at Santa Anita, part of the first racing tour. Should be a fantastic day of racing, and we've already got entries drawn.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, I can start working already. In fact, I've done Fridays. I'll work on Saturdays today. Gulfstream, of course, is going to have a huge day on that same day. So it's all happening on Saturday, first Saturday in March. March Madness begins, and March Madness and horse racing begins as well, because these are a couple of very, very important Triple Crown preps scheduled for Saturday. The San Felipe Fountain of Youth. We'll be looking at those races. And, of course, the Big Cap Day on Saturday as well.
So when we look at that Saturday action, we've got Gulfstream Park with a huge day, 14 races starting, I believe, 11:30 a.m. Eastern for the first post, maybe 11 a.m. Eastern. Check your start times for that at Gulfstream on Saturday. Fantastic day for the Fountain of Youth. But we're looking back at last week, and let's go to the big board with our first of 5 topics this week. We're talking about the Orient Express, all aboard last week in Saudi Arabia. Pantalassa, Jeff, was the engine, and nobody gets past the engine.
Behind these is Country Grammar, who's got work to do, and Jun Lightbolt towards the inside. Pantalassa moves back to the rails, has the advantage. Geoglyph in second place. Then between horses, Cafe Pharaoh, Japan all over the place here. They have the first 4. Pantalassa trying to last home. In second place, Geoglyph. Right down the outside, Country Grammar is staying on, but Pantalassa is lasting home at the moment. 50 yards to go. Pantalassa, Country Grammar on the scene late, but too late. Pantalassa takes it for Japan, the one they missed last year. They get this time. Country Grammar in second, then all of the Japanese runners.
Well, props to the winner. First off, Pantalassa from the rail, went all the way on the front end. Your thoughts on the winner and the runner-up, who just seems to enjoy that world travel, Country Grammar.
Country Grammar ran as well as I could have possibly hoped that he would run, just ran out of ground. His rider said, Frankie Dettori said he's really a 1.25 mile horse. This is 1.8 miles. These 2 horses will meet again in Dubai. So it'll be the second leg of this rivalry. And I hope they continue to go on and maybe even see him in the Breeders' Cup. But Pantalassa, I love the strategy. You got a speed horse, just go. Don't nurse them. Gun them out of the from the rail and let them play your game. And Pantalassa, who, of course, was a dead heat winner of the Dubai Turf last year in Dubai. He'd had one prior race on the dirt. This was his 25th lifetime start. Maybe he's always wanted to be a dirt horse.
Right.
And today on the front end, Jeremy, on this race, he wired the field. Disappointment at the Taba, who had a perfect trip, sitting right outside, came off the bridle, 5/16 of a mile from home and faded. But as Country Grammar ran his race, you have to admire him. Since being transferred from Chad Brown's barn, Country Grammar has been as consistent as you can possibly imagine. First or second in all of his starts since being taken over from Bob Baffert. Won the San Antonio, looked great here earlier in the meeting, and then went to Dubai, where he was. To Saudi Arabia, where he ran so well last year, and finished second. But the winner impressed me, Jeremy, and he's going to run against Country Grammar and try to get an extra furlong in Dubai. But the way he cut out the fractions, he's always going to be dangerous unless you pressure him, and nobody did.
And, when you look at Country Grammar, he's come a long way. 3 years ago, tomorrow, is it? It was the 29th of February on one of those weird leap years. But 3 years ago at this time, Country Grammar was 5th in the Fountain of Youth Stakes. The 4 horses who beat him that day, Ete Indian, Candy Tycoon, As Seen on TV, and Shotsky. Since then, the story has changed for Country Grammar. He's now earned $14.7 million. Only Gunrunner and Arrogate have earned more than $15 million as exclusively American horses. He is in rare air there, and what a change in career. He's only 5 for 15 lifetime, but for Country Grammar, $3.5 million added to the kitty for running second. Not a bad first half of the road trip. Of course, he'll go to Dubai next to the Dubai World Cup, where any good placing at all is going to put him right up there with Arrogate. If he wins it, obviously he'll overtake Arrogate. If he runs second, he's going to be right on the doorstep of being the richest American horse ever. And you would not have thought that about Country Grammar 3 years ago this week, 9 lengths behind in the Fountain of Youth. And really, there was no big upside to look forward to.
And here's a horse who's a full horse, 6 years of age. And Country Grammar, he's worth way more as a racehorse than he is a stallion. His outstanding portfolio notwithstanding, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be standing in line to breed to a son of Tonalist. But Country Grammar, as long as he is sound, all he has to do is running these 2 races, and that's way more money than he's going to be competing for here in the States.
Right.
And I remember after he won or ran well earlier last year when he was second in the Awesome again, a prep for the Breeders' Cup. Baffert was asked, "Are you going to go to the Breeders' Cup now?" And he said, "No." He didn't think he was that good, and he really isn't unless you put him where he can make his most money, and that's for him anyway overseas. So I expect him to be kept in training as long as he's sound, and he's a neat horse to watch because he always lays his body down.
And for those of you watching on video, not listening to the podcast, you can see in today's bout of man versus razor, it's Gillette 1, Plonk 0. I've got a little blood going on here. And,
you need a cut man, huh?
Yeah, I need like Ferdy Pacheco or somebody in the corner. But hey, we'll tough it out and bear on and move on to our second topic this week on the big board. It is elite indeed, because Elite Power has turned into the best sprinter in America after winning the Breeders' Cup last fall. Might he be the best sprinter in the world? He sure showed that in the Riyadh Dirt Sprint over in Saudi Arabia.
Elite Power for Frankie Dettori down the outside. Goodnight has got a nice trail through as well. Ryuna Yukina is staying on. Out in the lead, it's Justin who has the advantage, but Elite Power sweeps down the outside of the 200, and Elite Power is moving clear and going to take the Riyadh Dirt Sprint by a widening margin. Frankie Dettori for Belmont in the Juddmont colours that mean so much to this part of the world. Elite Power beating the second place Goodnight.
Well, the Americans run 1-2 in the sprint overseas. That's what we expect to happen when we send good sprinters over there. And those were 2 good sprinters in Elite Power and Goodnight. Jeff, what do you make of Elite Power, whose rapid ascension has been second to none?
Somehow he managed to lose not his first, not his second, but all 3 of his first 3 starts in his career. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, the light bulb went on, and he's now just an amazing horse. He's won 6 in a row. Of course, he won the Breeders' Cup Sprint, which I thought might have been a little sharp for him, but he still managed to win it anyway. Yeah. Champion sprinter. Now at age 5, he's a son of Curlin. He's only been a mile once, and that was a 1-turn mile, so he's never run around 2 turns. Right. He won the 1-turn mile easily by 3, ran a mile and 34 flat at Churchill. And I'm wondering now, Jeremy, after demolishing the sprint field, including Goodnight, who I think is a terrific sprinter. I really do. Yes. If you just keep him sprinting, that's how good he is. He blew him away like he was standing still. Right. Now he's back in the States. I mean, you'd have to think that the Met Mile would be next on the agenda. But after that, why wouldn't you give Elite Power the opportunity to run over a distance of ground? Again, by Curlin out of a really top-class race mare, Broadway's Alibi, a stakes winner, second in the Kentucky Oaks. Great family for Juddmont. And into the fall of this season, if he's as good as I think he is, I mean, who's to say that he couldn't be just as good over a distance of ground? I mean, this was the best race to me run in Saudi Arabia last weekend.
I agree with that. He was the most impressive runner over there. And when you think about a horse that's brilliant like this and their chance to get a route attempt, it seems like the Whitney at Saratoga. We mentioned this in a show last week, but the Whitney at Saratoga seems like that kind of race that historically is friendly to horses like this that are brilliantly fast. Let's see how far they can go. I think the 1 1/8 of the Whitney at the Spa with the configuration of that racetrack to run into the turn, how it favors some speed, I think that's a good thing for a horse like Elite Power. So let's see. Let's get him, maybe to the Met Mile, and then look maybe at the Whitney as a race where we can see Do we go even longer and try to be a classic kind of horse, or do we keep him at more of the sprint and middle distances? But there's nothing in his pedigree whatsoever that says he should be as good as he is now at what he's doing. It actually says he should be better going a little bit longer. So very, very impressive. He's not the only sprinter in Belmont's barn right now either that has impressive credentials, because Candyman Rocket got back to the win column in Stakes Company over the weekend in the Gulfstream Park Sprint. And let's go back and take a look at that one, because Mott now can try to separate. If he wants to take the short dashes, he may have Candyman Rocket to do it. And if he wants to go long, of course, he's got Elite Power. Here's Candyman Rocket with Pete Aiello on the mic.
Super Ocho better look over his shoulder. Here comes Candyman Rocket, and Candyman Rocket is now taking a clear lead, and he's still in hand. From the inside, Super Ocho is all out to try to hold on to second. Uncle Ernie down the stand side, closing good late ground. Final 16th of a mile. The Candyman Rocket is clear by 3, and the Candyman can, as he'll win it. Candyman Rocket for Frank Fletcher, win the Gulfstream Sprint by 2.
And Jeff, look, this is a good problem to have for Mott. We're used to seeing him with superstars on the turf or going long on the dirt. He's not used to having these brilliantly fast types. He's certainly capable with any kind of horse, but now he's got one short and middle distance or long.
Yeah, I don't think he'll put him in the same race. There are plenty of races they can divide him up. This colt, actually, I think he's a 5-year-old now. Might be more comfortable around one turn. I have a little bit less confidence in him running long than I do Elite Power, who I am absolutely convinced will not only run long, but even be better at long. So, I mean, you might mention, and we liked this horse last week when we were on our handicapping show on Friday, and I thought he might have to get outrun and then catch them late. He was on top of the quarter pole and just drew off and never really being asked much at all, one with plenty left. If he stays healthy, and he's had a checkered career, he's been started and stopped on a bunch of times, but this is a horse that if he stays healthy, he's going to have a monster year this year.
And to put a little cap on what we're talking about with these sprinters, Elite Power has now won 6 in a row. It's tough to do in the sprint ranks. I went back and looked at the champion sprinters in recent history. Here are the longest win streaks for some of these champion sprinters in recent history. Run Happy, 6 in a row. Dreyfong, 5 in a row. Roy H. never won more than 3 in a row. Whitmore had a 5-race win streak to max out. Jackie's Warrior never won more than 4 in a row. And Matoli, the tops on that list, had won 7 in a row back in 2019. That's what Elite Power will try to do next time. He's got 6 in the pocket, going for 7 straight wins. It's really something when it comes to sprinters, because there's not a lot of chance for error in some of these sprint races where the margin at the finish line is narrow, the race is shorter, the start is so much more important. It's tough to string together elite sprint wins like we've seen with Elite Power, and he's done it and almost all unchallenged. So it's really, really impressive what he's doing. Let's go to our third topic this week on It's Official. Our Triple Crown tracker is in high gear. Had a couple races last week to take a look at, one across the globe in the Saudi Derby. But more importantly, I think towards the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, and Belmont Trail was what we saw at Oaklawn Park in the Rebel Stakes last weekend. It was Confidence Game and Keith DeSormo getting the upset victory. Let's go back and take a listen with Vic Stauffer.
Confidence Game is 3 deep. 2 back to Gun Pilot. Talladega is next. Reincarnate still has a long way to come. And Giant Mischief off the top of the turn is joined by long shot Confidence Game. And Confidence Game is now a length and a half in front. Reincarnate is trying to split horses to the outside. And Red Route 1 from the back of the pack. It is Confidence Game. Red Route 1 moves into second. Confidence Game, Red Route 1, Confidence Game. The 63rd Rebel goes to Confidence Game over Red Route 1. Reincarnate was third and Verifying finished fourth.
I was having flashbacks there to 2016. Exaggerator through the slop and those green and gold silks for Don't Tell My Wife Stables, one of my favorite owner names in all of racing, and Keith DeSormo. Sloppy track worked out well for Confidence Game, Jeff, and this is a horse who had been third in the Lecomte Stakes. So what kind of measuring stick are we looking at? Are the Fairgrounds horses superior to what we're seeing at Oaklawn? What do we make of the winner? A lot to unpack in this year's Rebel Stakes.
Well, the first thing I want to say is I think it's all inconclusive, because Confidence Game was a big price in this race, 18-1, and he was 18-1 based on the fact that his form warranted 18-1. Yeah. And now he shows up here and wins this race, 94 by our number, a career top. It's a solid number, not flashy, but good enough this time of the year. but it was accomplished over a wet track. And I can tell you, I learned a long time ago that when horses look good on a wet track, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be just as good on a fast track. Exaggerator being the example. I think Exaggerator won 3 Grade 1s that year. All of them were on wet tracks. Right. On fast ground, not so much. So I don't know how good Confidence Game is. He ran well, taken at face value. If that race had been on a fast track, then I could have maybe trusted the form a little bit more. The fact is, I just don't know. And here's another thing about him. Maybe I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to this, but here's the problem I have with Confidence Game. It shouldn't be any problem, and probably it isn't. But here's a horse by Candy Ride, and out of a half sister to Zenyatta. Sold as a yearling for $25,000. That's a ham sandwich for most of these guys. The big guys are going to look at this horse, and they're going to reject him, and nobody bid on this horse. Even the breeder didn't want him. So I don't know what's wrong with him. I don't know if he's crooked or I don't know what his issue is or why he was a throwaway at the sale. But usually these kinds of horses, they can win a race or two, but they're never going to be, you know what I'm saying? They're never going to be the great ones bring $2 million at auction, not $25,000. So I don't know how good Confidence Game is. Now, you and I liked Red Route 1 in this race, and he went from way, way back. He ran probably as good as we hoped he would run at 9-1. And ran second and did what he was supposed to do. But the first half of this race was 46 flat. They went the mile in 37-3, which means they went the second half in 51. It was slow. I can tell you, 51 and something. What else? So it was kind of a race that fell apart, quite frankly. And so when you come from way back like Red Route 1 did, and even Confidence Game, it was closer to the pace. And it's an off track. I am not going to trust the results. I'm going to say, show it to me next time on fast ground, because it wasn't that great a race. Reincarnate ran well for third, but we talked about this last week. I never thought he was like all that, right. From California. So, and Verifying, we talked about him winning with a perfect trip last week, and maybe his form wasn't as good. So I'm not sold on this race. Maybe you can convince me otherwise.
Well, you say show it to me next time. That would be the Arkansas Derby, the final leg of this series. But who's going to be around? We're talking Victory Formation won the Smarty Jones, then went and ran a clunker in the Risen Star. Right. Arabian Night won the Southwest, the second leg of the series, and is staying back in California. He's not coming back from the Arkansas Derby by any indication at this point. Now we have who knows what to make of the result in the Rebel Stakes, where a horse who was well beaten third in the Lecomte came over and won it. All I can say right now is I don't feel good about the horses who have been in Arkansas this spring. I don't think it's a particularly strong region, the way it looks and the way it matches up. Basically 2 horses came in from Fairgrounds to win the races, and the other one came in from California. The locally based horses haven't won any of the races in the Arkansas Derby Series yet. If there is going to be one, I think it will be Red Route 1, who's the best of everybody. And again, we talked about Creator, and I think Creator was 2016 as well, as we were talking back here, right? 16
I think
or
so,
17 with Creator. So it's the same kind of crop, Exaggerator, Creator, those kind of horses. And I think Red Route 1 is Creator incarnate, if you will, and pun intended there, I suppose. And to the finish line in the Arkansas Derby at 1 1/8, I like the chances of Red Route 1 there, and then maybe as a Belmont Stakes kind of horse. But there's nobody brilliantly fast in this Oaklawn group this year. I think that's what we've learned to this point. And I think the win here by Confidence Game, certainly if you like Instant Coffee, a horse I do like who won the Lecomte, you got to feel better about it. The horse who was well-beaten third behind Instant Coffee just came back and won this. Some other horses that Instant Coffee's run against have come back and run well. He's held pretty good company line to this point, and we'll see what he does. Probably final start for Instant Coffee will be the Louisiana Derby for Brad Cox. We had some other 3-year-old action across the globe in the Saudi Derby last week. Let's go back and look at the stretch run where the American having a meltdown. Last year's Del Mar Futurity participant was trying to stretch his speed to the mile in the Saudi Derby. Let's go back with the replay and see how it shook out.
Hanging tough over on the far side, having a meltdown. Commissioner King on the near side. The two are still locked in combat. They remain about 4 to 5 lengths clear as they race inside the final furlong. Both are weary horses. Dermot Takage is trying to stay on with Continua, having a meltdown, and Commissioner King, the jewel for the Derby. Commissioner King in the final bound. May well have beat having a meltdown. Dermot Takage behind those S and Nico made late ground, and then Continua, but they never got involved. involved. It was just a stretch duel between Commissioner King. His rider celebrates. He, I think, has run down, having a meltdown in a memorable stretch duel.
They kind of gifted having a meltdown the lead in that San Vicente, if you remember, with basically stablemates involved in that race.
Right.
He had to work much harder throughout this race, and I think he actually proved himself well and acquitted himself well, because I thought he was a little fraudulent getting the easy lead handed to him in the San Vicente. But this race across the globe, a mile long, or an eighth of a mile longer to the 1 mile distance, I thought he ran pretty darn well in here. He is not a Kentucky Derby horse in terms of distance, but up to middle distances, I think he's very effective, and this was a good effort for having a meltdown.
Problem is, this was his Kentucky Derby, $1.5 million purse. He sent there to win it, because I'm not sure he's ever going to run in a race that has that kind of purse. I mean, he's supposed to win this race, and the horse that beat him, Commissioner King, a $9,000 purchase in January of 2021. He was sold as what they would refer to as a short yearling. You know, he practically 2 months over. He just turned a yearling, and those are usually horses that are guys that just want to dump them. You know what I'm saying? They just get rid of them. Right. I don't even want to pay money on. I can sell him as a yearling next September, but he's not going anywhere. He doesn't, you know. So the bottom line is, Commissioner King coming out of nowhere. He had won two of his 3 races. But who the heck knows who he's running with over there? Right. You know, so I don't know. But he won. He won nicely. I think having a meltdown's a very solid 3-year-old up to a mile, maybe 7/8. But you're right. There's no, and maybe they're going to talk about Commissioner King as maybe being a Derby horse, but there's nothing in here that I think we have to put on the list quite yet.
No, and the 3 dots go next to the UAE Derby, you know, as you're writing the story for these horses. The UAE Derby, of course, will be a mile and 3/16, a much different test than this 1/3 or this mile race in Saudi Arabia. And so I would have to think the Aidan O'Brien, the Coolmores, the people who typically run a horse from Europe in the UAE Derby have got to be feeling good about themselves, about what they might be able to put there. And if we get a horse from the UAE Derby to come and run in the Kentucky Derby this year, my thought is it probably comes from Europe, maybe one of the Japanese horses. But the Japanese horses in the Saudi Derby were not stellar. It's about the only race they weren't stellar in Saudi Arabia over the past couple of years. But, you know, I think if you're going to get a UAE type horse to get into this year's Kentucky Derby, it'd be one of those Coolmore Aidan O'Brien types.
I'll tell you, a horse is going over there is Worcester. He's a maiden, if you can believe that, but I don't think he's ever going to show his best until he runs a mile, an 1/8 mile and a quarter. And I think he's going to be, I'm pretty sure he's going. So that's a American California horse that we can look at for sure. But again, when you offer $1.5 million, it's kind of enticing to go over and get it, because some of these horses, they're never going to get a chance trying to get that kind of money. You know, so anyway, we'll see what happens down the road. But thought we'd talk about you don't have to pay $3 million to get a nice 3-year-old. You can buy one for $9,000 or $25,000 if you want to take them to Arkansas and run them there. So there are good cheap yearlings out there. You got to get lucky though.
There are some value to be had. And we just saw Silver Charm, right? A $17,000 purchase, I believe. And Silver Charm just celebrated his birthday the other day. So a bunch of that on social media. Let's talk more on our Triple Crown tracker about races coming up this weekend. It's the 77th running of the Fountain of Youth Stakes on Saturday at Gulfstream Park. Again, as part of the First Racing Tour. Huge day of racing action. They've got a mandatory payout in the Rainbow Six coming up on Saturday at Gulfstream Park that this Fountain of Youth will be a part of. The carryover right now is $1 million coming into this week's racing, a little over $1 million in carryover for the Rainbow Six. It is not a mandatory payout early in the week. So if this thing carries to Saturday, track officials expecting $8 million to be bet into the Rainbow Six as the estimated pool. So be sure to get your handicapping groove on for Saturday. Jeff, Fountain of Youth Stakes has a nice size field of 10, a pretty interesting group, but none more interesting than the Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner Forte making his 3-year-old return. What do you make of the Fountain of Youth as we sit now, 5 days out?
Well, I think Forte is a good horse. I'm not saying he's a great horse. He'd be the kind of horse that I would normally try to beat in a race like this. I've watched him train as you have. He doesn't look cranked up to me. He looks fine, but I don't think they've, tightened the knot yet. I mean, I think Todd wants to get a good race out of him and not going to worry too much. if he gets beat. If he were undefeated, they probably would want to try to keep him that way. But he's not. So what's another loss? I'm going to hurt him. Just use this race for what it's supposed to be, a prep for the next one. And whatever that might be, Florida Derby or whatever. But I looked through the field here, Jeremy, trying to find, okay, this is a horse I can bet against Forte. Honestly, I couldn't find one because I don't think this is a strong field. You've got some, first of all, I didn't think the Holy Bull was that great of a race for one thing.
Right.
And so I didn't want to take anything out of that. There's a couple of horse Blazing Sevens. We have not seen him since the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and it was a distant fourth behind Forte. So I went horse by horse, and I said, I don't think Forte really has to be 100% to win. I like where he's drawn, going to get a good trip. He did win his debut, so we know he can run well fresh, and I doubt he was drilled hard leading up to that race. So maybe he's the kind of horse that doesn't need all that much. So it would be nice to see Forte to go out and justify or verify his juvenile form as the champion, and then go on from there. I expect him to win. I will be disappointed if he doesn't, because I don't think there are any monsters in this race. Just in the bit of handicapping that I've already done.
Yeah, we'll knuckle down on this by Friday when we do our first call podcast on the weekend and preview all the big races on the first racing tour for Saturday. But I'm going to give you a little early one here. The 7 Mage. This is a son of Good Magic. Really impressive in the career debut. Gets in light with 119 pounds. There's not a lot of speed in the race. First time stretching out is always a good thing. You and I have talked about that before. If they're going to win on the stretch out, first time can be the way to go. And this horse is fast. And we'll see how far he can go. Good Magic ran third in this race, coming off his Breeders' Cup Juvenile back in the day. So Gustavo Delgado, I believe the trainer there. Javier Castellano is riding like he's 25, 30 years old again. I mean, he's really having a good winter this year. So Mage, however you want to say it, I think this is an interesting performer. That's the only one, because like you say, of the others, you're like looking, can any of these horses beat Forte? And you kind of go, nah. As you go through the list, this is the one who's the X factor. He's only had the one career start, but a mile and 16th at Gulfstream, short run to the first turn, short stretch. It sets up for a horse who's kind of a sprinter on the stretch out a lot of times. So that's one that I may end up picking on top for Countdown to the Crown. And by the time we get to our first call podcast at the end of the week, but he's got my attention as we hit Tuesday.
Okay. Well, I will give him a second look. I saw his maiden win. I liked it. Yeah. I know it's tough for a horse like this to make that jump, but I'm gonna see if I can get a little bit more in tune with him, and then maybe, because I know what the others are.
Right.
I think I do. But this one we don't. This one, he might be much better than I give him credit for. And I thought he was a good winner, but I didn't think he'd step up and win the Fountain of Youth, but maybe he will. So maybe you're onto something. I will definitely check him out.
Important to look at XBTV for the library of workouts for the Fountain of Youth, as well as the San Felipe, which will be run on Saturday, to see which one of these 3-year-olds are moving forward. We've got the exclusive workouts in the morning for you with XBTV. San Felipe on Saturday, part of the undercard, race number 6 on Big Cap Day. Santa Anita Handicap will wrap things up a little later in the afternoon. But as for the 3-year-olds, we're on our Triple Crown tracker part of the show. We talk about the San Felipe, Jeff, a field of 11 in here. Tim Yakteen ends up with 5 in the entry box, 4 of those former Bob Bafferts. He's got one of his own, Impractical Move. He adopts 4. He became Nick Zito overnight with 5 horses in a derby. But what do we make of this year's field for the San Felipe? Surprising number of entries in the box. When we've seen a lot of 4, 5 horse fields on the West Coast, it's good to see them all together here, and some new faces as well.
This is one of the more fun San Felipes we've had in recent years, because previously it was which one of the 5 Bafferts are you going to bet on, And while many of these are ex-Bafferts, they're not Baffert anymore. Throws a little bit of a wrinkle in here. Yeah. I haven't completed my handicap on this race yet, but I just want to make a couple of quick observations. We'll get into this much deeper on Friday, because there's some video that I want to show on Friday that might help the handicapper with regards to workouts. But I can tell you this, number 3, Practical Move. I loved his race at Los Al. I know there's only 5 in the race. The horse that ran 4th, by the way, won the Guineas, 2,000 Guineas at Dubai not too long ago, a Doug O'Neill roller. So that franks the form a little bit, if nothing else. Sure. I like the way he won it. And he's trained really well too. So I like Practical Move. Numbers are rising. They're not brilliant yet, but he's getting better. Then you have the fast horses, Hijazi and Go Rocket Ride, and they both look to me like they're really high-class sprinters, but I don't think mentally that they really are ready to be at their best over distance to ground. I think Hijazi, he just wants to get it on. I mean, you can't grab him and slow him down. And the same thing with Go Rocket Ride. He was sent hard from the rail inside when he broke his maiden. In his workouts, they've been trying to slow him down. He's still pretty keen. And I could see those two horses hooking up. And then you have the horse that I wish I owned, and that's Skinner. I mean, Skinner is such a good-looking horse. He's by Curlin out of a terrific mare named Winding Way, who won the Rancho Bernardo, with a really high-class sprinter here in California. He earned a 95 Beyer number in his maiden win back in February. First start since last fall. He's a much better horse than he was then. He's grown up. He's trained well. He works with his ears up. He's just fooling around. He's going in a minute and change. It looks like he can go in 58. And he relaxes. He's the kind of horse you can take back, and he won't pull on you. He's got the Kentucky Derby profile. I don't know if he's got the Kentucky Derby ability, but that's what we're going to find out in the San Felipe. To me, he is exciting there for John Sheriff's a colt by the name of Skinner.
I remember talking about him last summer at Del Mar after a start or two, and I were saying he's not for these like 5.5 and 6 furlong sprints at Del Mar in the summer, but keep your eye on Skinner down the line. And as you're saying, he's starting to develop into one to really keep an eye on. That's the San Felipe coming up on Saturday, part of the first racing tour. And again, Jeff and I on Friday will handicap that race and 7 other stakes on the First Call podcast, as we do each and every Friday. Back to our topics this week on It's Official. Our fourth topic this week, Rick is almost back. Rick Dutrow we're talking about here. The Kentucky Derby winning trainer, Preakness winning trainer of Big Brown fame, who was suspended back in 2013, yesterday was granted the ability to reapply for his license. And today, the New York racing authorities gave him the thumbs up. He's just got to get his paperwork turned in. And we're going to see Rick Dutrow back training horses, Jeff, in who knows? I mean, what we're looking at as far as the time frame goes, he was suspended back in 2013 for a barn raid, medication infractions. There were syringes in his barn that had medications in. Trainers can't have syringes; only veterinarians can. Needles and all that. So the barn raid got Rick Dutrow back. I believe it was 2010, 2011. He appealed it all the way through the beginning of 2013 before exhausting all of his appeals, and then he was sent to the sidelines for 10-year suspension. One of the longest suspensions that I can remember, and a lot of people in racing. You think about Patrick Bianco and his suspension, much shorter. He's been back for several years now. 10 years is a long time to sideline Rick Dutrow. And he always had people on both sides of the aisle when it comes to Dutrow. There were people who full-throatedly defend him and say that this wasn't right. The suspension didn't fit the infractions. There are other people that were saying he was what was wrong with the game, and that people like this need to be made an example of. Whether that's the right thing or not for justice is a different debate in a legal forum. But it is what it is. It was a 10-year suspension. It passed, and Rick Dutrow is going to be back in the shed row sometime soon. I mean, he's had quite a bit of success from 1998 to 2012, Jeff, 2012 being his last full years. Those were 15 consecutive seasons. He didn't win at 23% for 15 consecutive seasons. He won at 23% or greater each of those 15 seasons. Never had a win rate below 23% during that 15-year run. Of course, in 2005, he won the Breeders' Cup Classic, and the horse of the year was St. Liam, a horse who began his career with Tony Reinstetler. People forget that, was a transfer to his barn. In 2017, he won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile with the Oklahoma-bred Kip DeVille. And in 2007 with Kip DeVille. And in 2008, he hit his fame with the great Big Brown, the winner of the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness Stakes. Let's go back and relive that Preakness. And Jeff, give us your thoughts on the end of this as we see Rick Dutrow back in the game.
And they turn for home in the Preakness, and Big Brown has seized the lead, and he is pulling away. Big Brown's doing it again. He is disappearing from the field. He's in front by 5. And then it's Race Car Rhapsody, and on the outside, Macho again, and just cruising into the line. Kent DeSorbo looked in the rearview mirror. Nobody was there. He waltzes home to win the Preakness. No one's ever been close to Big Brown. Macho again finished in second. Ichabod Crane was third. So there he is, Big Brown, and it's now on to Belmont and the elusive Triple Crown.
And Jeremy, he really should have won the Triple Crown that year. We know he was virtually easy in the race, but he was a horse. If memory serves, I didn't look this up because I didn't know we were going to talk about this until this morning, and I didn't get around to doing it. But if you remember, he had an inside draw in the Belmont, and he got muscled a little bit, and they didn't send him. And I think the horse got a little mad. And he's the kind of horse when you're that much the best, as he proved not only in the Derby but in the Preakness that we saw. You don't worry about anybody else. Just don't let them dictate what you need to do. And of course, he was virtually eased in that race, and I think that kind of started his downfall a little bit, where people maybe didn't like the way he reacted to that loss. I don't know. It was a kind of a magnifying glass on him. The only thing that I know about Rick Dutrow is that we actually, when I had Team Valor back in the early 90s, used him as a trainer for one horse. I think we gave him one horse, and he was a sprinter. And two things about that. Number one, the horse ran great for us. He won a number of races for us, and he was an easy guy to deal with. There was no real reason for us not to give horses back to him, other than the fact that we had decided to have a private trainer, Mark Hennig, so we didn't branch out as much as we did. But the only experience I had with him 33 years ago was positive, So I hope he comes back. I'm sure he'll get horses. I'm sure he'll have a big barn. He's obviously an excellent trainer, excellent horseman. And maybe 10 years will change somebody. Maybe, he can do it without cutting corners. I hope that's the case, because he's certainly a terrific trainer, and the record speaks for itself.
That's the thing, will 10 years change somebody? I mean, that's probably the longest sentence we've seen probably for a modern trainer to come back from. And is he a different guy when he comes back than when he left? Some people argue he was never a bad guy to start with. Some people argue that, he's the spitting image of the devil himself. I mean, there's a wide swath of opinions when it comes to Rick Dutrow. And I go in and out of my opinion of him as well. You look, I mean, you got the cantankerous, he agitated the legislators, the legislative bodies in the different jurisdictions. His brother Tony talked about that a lot after he was suspended, that, he ruffled the wrong feathers, and they came back and made sure that they knew who was boss. And so there's probably a little bit of that going on too. So in that role, you feel a little bit sympathetic to the 10 years part of it. The actual suspension, though, don't feel bad about it at all. There were, I mean, we could talk conspiracies, whether or not stuff was planted in his barn and all that, and that's all been put on and put on display and put on in courts and through various appeals, and not legislated as such. So that part of it goes into the rumor mill. What we do know is he was suspended for 10 years. He's back now. And I think he'll do okay. His significant other, Michelle Nevin, trained throughout the course of this last decade and has done well for herself. I would imagine that there's going to be some crossover to Barnes there. I think they're going to be former Barnes that work with him that will be happy to come back with him again. IEH stable was a little bit no, I don't want to say controversial. It's not.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. Controversial, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Mostly because of the off the track stuff, not because of the
right. And the personalities rub people and things like that. So, like, are they back with a big brown kind of horse, and would they come back to him? They haven't had anything really of any significance, Mike Ivorone and company, in the last several years. So some of that may have faded, right? And like time fades everything, as we talk about a lot. Time heals a lot of wounds. And there will be some forgiveness, and I'm a forgiving person as a Christian and everything like that. I want him to be clean. I want him to do well. And if his 10 years is enough time served, which is as long as anybody's been sentenced for any training violations, if you're not going to ban people forever from the game, then 10's about as long as it's going to be. He paid his time. Let's see what he does, but the leash will be short, right? And that's the thing. If there's anything that people don't feel is on the up and up, he's not going to be given much leash whatsoever. And that's deservedly so and earned, given what he's done over the years. Let's go to our fifth and final topic this week on It's Official. It's our Stars of Tomorrow segment. We're looking for Stars of Tomorrow, but we had a flashback to Caddyshack and the great 1980 movie with Carl Spackler last week at Gulfstream Park.
Carl Spackler starts to move in under Jose Ortiz. He's now third, Saint in the City fourth. From between horses, it's more than tough as they run to the top of the stretch. Gotta Like Him has the lead. On the outside, Carl Spackler says, okay, I guess we're playing for keeps now as he sweeps forward to take the lead. Carl Spackler front and center. I guess the kidding around is pretty much over as Carl Spackler is just a matter of putting lengths between him and everybody else to teach him a lesson. Carl Spackler, rejoice. Carl Spackler is in front by 7 in the end.
We're going to need a SAG card for Pete Aiello because I think he recited half the lines in the movie during the race call there. Good job by Pete working the puns in. But all kidding aside, this is a second-time starter on the turf by Lope de Vega for Chad Brown, who looks like a serious 3-year-old on the grass.
Oh, that was a spectacular race. And he'd actually run every bit as good at his debut when he got beat a photo by an English Channel colt of Calumet's named Far Bridge. And they were a mile in front of everybody else that day. Blistering race, beautiful mover, bred to be any kind of grass horse. And he was a short price for a reason. And the way he lengthened out, margin of victory, 6 3/4 lengths. But last 8th and 11 and 2 fast, the last quarter in pretty close to 23 flat. So I think, not the most glamorous division, 3-year-old turf horses right now, but Carl Spackler of Caddyshack fame, Bill Murray in that, and most of the lines in that movie were ad-libbed, by the way, according to what I read. So it was just one long Saturday Night Live skit, basically. But he was a great character, a funny character, and this might be a tremendous racehorse for sure. Carl Spackler, Irish bred from Caddyshack, and maybe a horse that's going to get a lot of following as a 3-year-old, and maybe they'll try him on dirt. I doubt it, but you never know.
Yeah, he's by Lope de Vega, who's all turf, and the same sire of Newspaper of Record, who Chad Brown had a lot of success with. Newspaper of Record, of course, and the Dam Zendaya was a Grade 2 winner for Chad Brown, so he knows his family really well. He knows what they could do. I say they stay turf. Crown Royal American Turf on Kentucky Derby Day, those kind of races like that. The Belmont Turf Invitational, the Saratoga Derby Invitational. There are some chances for these 3-year-olds to make some serious money on the green. It's not a glamorous division, but it can be a lucrative one, and one to keep an eye on there, Carl Spackler. That's going to wrap up this week's edition of It's Official. But before we go out, one quick little bonus topic, just a news nugget here. Get your quick reaction on one of these bits, Jeff. Hall of Fame announcement today on the new ballot. Who will be on the ballot for the first time this year for the class of 2023. Among the horses, Arrogate, California Chrome, Lady Eli, and Songbird are the 4 new names on the ballot. That might be a clean sweep. And I know a guy that you've had train your horses over the years, John Sadler, a new face on the Hall of Fame ballot. Your thoughts on John?
I have John Sadler on a winner's circle picture in my room when he was an assistant to Dave Hoffman's 1978. So I've known John for a while, and he obviously the timing is good after Flightline, but he's had a great career. He's won a number of major races, Breeders' Cups and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you mentioned the horses and John, and I don't know because I don't really participate in that, so I'm not sure what the criteria is, but they all look like they're deserving to me. I couldn't say, no, that horse wasn't that good. They were all great horses, and John had a Hall of Fame career as far as I'm concerned. So put them all in. Make them happy. They deserve it.
Making the ballot, the nominees, just in that in itself is a tremendous career honor. So congratulations to the Hall of Fame announcements, people who are, and the horses who are involved in this morning's announcements for the class of 2023 for the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame. Great place right across the street from the racetrack at Saratoga, right there across the street on Union Avenue. If you're ever up there, be sure to check out the Hall of Fame. Highly recommended from yours truly. That's going to wrap up this edition of It's Official. Our 5 topics are now in the books because Jeff Siegel and I said so, and we'll do it all again a week from today, every Tuesday. But between now and then, we get out the printed out past performances and our handicapping sheets and our workout videos and get to work on handicapping for Friday's First Call podcast, where we'll look at 8 weekend stakes races and what a weekend it's going to be. Big Cap Day at Santa Anita, Fountain of Youth Day at Gulfstream Park. It's the first racing tour, 4 to 6 Eastern. You can watch it all on CNBC and, of course, play it with ExpressBet and FirstBet. Jeff and I will help you on the handicapping end on Friday. Jeff, you going to get to work?
Yeah, I have to. Big fields, both tracks. I mean, was that 14 races or something at Gulfstream, 12, I think, at Santa Anita. I mean, lots of work, but the good thing is they drew them early. We got all weekend, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday to handicap. No excuses, Jeremy. We should nail this, both tracks. No, we should, not every winner, but most of them.
We'll see you on Friday. Good luck, everybody, with your handicapping.